All right, folks, good morning. Welcome, everyone, to the November edition of our Catch Up with Keeper webinar series. We have got a really exciting one for you today, so I'm excited to share that with you, and thank you all so much for joining. While we give people a couple of minutes here to go ahead and pile in, would love to hear in the chat, where's everyone calling in from? Wow, always cool to see. We really paint the country here from coast to coast. So thank you all so much for joining. Seeing a lot of Texas here. And some Canadians. I'm glad the Canadians are showing up in strength because we've got some exciting things that are Canada specific as well. All right. And it is now 2 past the top of the hour. So we're going to go ahead and get things started. So once again, thank you all so much for taking the time to join us on our Catch Up with Keeper webinar series. In case this is your first Catch Up with Keeper webinar, here's the way that things break down. First and foremost, the structure. So we'll start with a quick walkthrough of all of the latest and greatest features we've shipped over the course of the last month. Then we will pause for a little bit of Q&A. Sometimes there's a lot of bit of Q&A, and we have to break that up into 2 sections. And then we will open things up to an app showcase. And this week, we are thrilled to be joined by Melissa Honan of Bookkeeping for Painters. Melissa has recently posted in the Facebook group talking about this price increase letter. And I learned that she actually she has an amazing course on how to make sure that you are charging and getting paid for what you're worth. So super excited for her to talk about pricing and pricing changes and whatever else she wants to talk about. All right. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And before we dive into some core Keeper features that you may be seeing in here, I want to talk about some of the things that we've done under the hood. So this month, we spent a ton of time focusing on performance and stability. So in particular, load times on the pages, as I'm sure you are all aware, could use some improvements. So that is really what we focused on in a lot of November. You should notice the client list loading faster. You should notice the close page loading faster. And you should also notice that the close page doesn't slow down on long sessions like it did sometimes for some users. So really excited to continue to make those upgrades. So that is not just a one-time, one-off November thing, but we'll continue to. We've got some good changes coming in December, and then of course we'll continue to focus on that over the course of the next year as well. All right, on to the fun stuff. Because it is November, December, and rolling right on into January, we're working on 1099s and working on making our functionality that much deeper and richer and more capable of serving your needs. So in the Prepared 1099s report, we added a super cool new feature that lets you exclude transactions by their check number. So to show you really quickly how to do that, you click your excluded list, and now there's this check or reference number exclude list. And so you can see here I've added debit and DBT. And I'm going to take a step back and explain why we did that and what that helps enable. So for those of you who have clients who use debit cards primarily for their spend instead of credit cards and debit cards both are what are considered payment settlement entities. And as a result, if you pay someone with a debit card or pay someone with a credit card, those transactions should not be reported on a 1099 that goes to that vendor. However, with a credit card, this is super easy. You just filter out all your credit card transactions, and credit card is an account type, so we just exclude that automatically. And of course, you can include that by unchecking this exclude CC spend setting. But with debit cards, it's more confusing. So there's no core concept of a debit card transaction in QuickBooks. So you have to kind of reinvent it yourself. And the way we reinvented it, this is actually not new. I believe this works in QuickBooks Desktop, but don't quote me on that, is we can filter out transactions by their check number. So essentially what this means is if you see a debit card transaction, you can add the check number, a check number of your choosing. Maybe it's debit, maybe it's DBT. I like DBT because it's quick and easy to type. Some people use like MC for MasterCard or Visa or whatever that number is. But so basically, when you're classifying transactions in the bank feed, you come in here and then you can add a check number here that says DBT, for example, and then that transaction will be excluded from your 1099 reportable spend here in Keeper. Just to show you a quick sort of look at what that looks like here. So we've got El Segundo Roofers, and we can see the only eligible transaction for spend totals here is this one. But if we click to all vendor transactions, we can see there's actually another one here. And this says debit card because the actual check number we typed in was debit card. And so if we click into QuickBooks to open that transaction, we can see we've got the check number is debit card, and that's what's causing this transaction to be excluded. All right. And one other super cool small change to the 1099 vendor requests. At least I think it's super cool. I don't know whether that says more about me or about the feature. But in your click in the setting that says click here to fill out a new W-9, one of the, I guess, pieces of oversights as we filled this form out is if you have a, let's say, single member LLC or a sole prop that doesn't have an EIN, this you can fill that out as a individual, but you can't fill that out as a business, which is problematic because you may very well not have an EIN. So in the vendor request form, we added this this option here that lets the person who's filling out this form switch from an EIN to a social security number, and that lets them type in their social security number, and then the W-9 will fill out accordingly as well. All right. Oh, and one more interjection. If you have any questions on anything we've gone over here so far, please drop them in the Q&A section of the bottom Zoom bar rather than the chat, so that we can make sure that we get to those. All right. And last but not least, I'm going to show some functionality that we've been working really, really hard on for a long time. And this is the first time we're going to publicly show it, but it is not out yet. So it is out for a few firms who are very graciously testing all of the very sharp corners. But now I am going to show it to you all here. And that is Keeper's receipt capture functionality. So this is something that I know a lot of y'all have requested for a long time, and is something that we have been listening to y'all for. We've always wanted to make sure that we do things the right way. We've always wanted to make sure as we added more breadth and more depth to Keeper, that doesn't end up feeling like this terribly clunky experience where it's like the feature is too hard to access, so you don't end up using it in the first place. So receipts is in here. That's the coolest thing about this. Before we dive into all of the functionality, all of the things we've done, I think my absolute favorite part is just how seamlessly it integrates with the entire rest of the Keeper ecosystem, with the close page right here, with the client list. Really, everything is just built on top of the core primitives that we built Keeper out with for client communications and posting transactions and attachments. And we sort of weaved all of those together to build out our receipt management functionality. So most of receipts lives right here in your client uploads inbox. And before I sort of dive headlong into feature after feature, I want to just break things up. We're going to sort of talk about two major pieces. First is how do you get receipts in here? And second is what do you do with receipts? So because Keeper builds on top of the functionality, Keeper's receipts builds on top of the functionality that's already available within Keeper, the first thing that your clients can do to give you receipts is they can go to the portal and they can drag and drop files, same way that they always have. So they could just drag and drop a file right here, and it will go straight to your inbox. And then you can treat it like a receipt and post it to a transaction. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So first is your clients can upload these files. Second is, I know this has been a long requested feature for a long time, and this will be coming in with receipts, is you can now manually add files in here yourself. So if your client, I don't know, sends you a zip file of a bunch of receipts, you could just drag and drop them right here, and then upload the receipts right here to Keeper as well. And then, of course, we have some other systems that are not actually here in Keeper or in any UI at all, and that's email and texting. So again, building on top of the functionality that we have built for other use cases, the phone number that you picked when you were setting up your practice, so that's in your branding, your practice phone number. This phone number, your clients will be able to text, and that will send a picture of whatever they text into Keeper as a receipt, so that you can manage it as well. So that if your clients are on the go, they can literally just text you and you have the things that you need. Of course, more traditionally, and probably more importantly, we also support email forwarding. So basically, there's a new feature, right, or new setting called receipt capture, where you can set up an email receipt, or set up an email forwarding address, and then all of the emails that you send there will get routed into Keeper as well. This is still a little bit work in process, so I won't spend a ton of time talking about it. But this is something that we're super excited for. Is it's just going to be one forwarding email. So you can give your clients all a single email, especially for clients who have multiple businesses. They don't need to like remember business A at keeper.app or business B at keeper.app. You can just give them something that is, again, completely custom branded. So it can be like docs at mypracticename.com. And then just based on who's the person that's sending that email, it'll automatically route into the appropriate client. All right. So now that we've got the receipts into Keeper, what do we do with them? And this is, I think, where we start. I think things start to get really, really cool. So first thing is all of this is powered by a really, really powerful OCR engine that reads all your documents when you scan them. You can choose to have those auto scan or manually scan based on this toggle setting right here. And then once we recognize that a scanned document is a transaction, we'll put it down here in your transaction file. So your files inbox, uploads inbox looks the same. And then your transaction files, we'll put everything down in here. And we'll take that OCR data and we'll also use it to automatically extract fields like your transaction date, like the vendor that you spent money with, the amount. And for the Canadians in the room, I said I would have something for you. And that thing is we'll also extract out the tax code. So we'll extract out whether it's GST, PST. We'll extract the specific tax line items. So spent a lot of time making sure that this works well, both north and south of our northern border. All right. So once you've got those in here, just like any other table in Keeper, you can edit all of these just like you would with any other transaction. You can see here we have this light bulb that will show up if you suggest a transaction. Or sorry, if Keeper's OCR will suggest a transaction. So we can see here, this is superhuman. And so that's why we suggested superhuman. So starting to take advantage of the fact that in Keeper, you can see all of your transactions, you can see all of your vendors, you can see your entire chart of accounts. Another way that we take advantage of seeing all of your transactions is with auto matching. So again, we can see all your transactions, and that really cuts down on the risk of posting in a duplicate entry. So basically, you'll see a little matching symbol right here, and you can click here. And if we have multiple potential matches, you can see both of those here. But of course, we can see we've got the script, and so now we can confirm that as a match, which will take the receipt that someone uploaded for you and auto post it into that transaction instead of posting it as a new transaction entirely. So a lot of work to prevent those duplicates. You can see, in addition to the light bulbs, we also have lightning bolts, and that is because we also support rules here within Keeper. So I'll touch a little bit on these, but there's sort of a couple of different major flavors of rules. The rules engine itself is super general, so you can do anything you want with it. I think one of the most exciting pieces about that is you can do things like create a rule for payment accounts. You can say, if we notice 2,400 in the receipt, automatically set the payment account to Chase checking, for example. But in addition, we've got Home Depot, for example. And so you can see here, We can recognize that this is Home Depot, and then we can set the vendor to Home Depot. We can set the type to expense, the category to job supplies, the class, the payment account, really everything here that you want to pull out of this receipt, you can do as a rule, and then it will automatically categorize any new scans here as well. And of course, here you can see this is an example of the sort of more detailed editing interface. You pop out of the table here, and you can see your entire transaction. And then you can also come here and edit any of these fields. All right. So that is a quick crash course tour of all the things you can do in Keeper's receipt management functionality. And so where does that leave us? Where are we today? So receipt management is currently in a private alpha. That means there's like 3 or 4 practices who are very graciously developing scar tissue as they help us round off the sharp corners in the private alpha. In a couple of weeks, we should be going into a beta, which means things will be more stable. We'll be letting more firms in. There will be public documentation about how to use the product, how to use receipts, how to set it up. So if you haven't already signed up for that beta, I'm going to drop a link here into the chat, and you can sign up for it there as well. So yeah, so that's pretty much receipts. Super excited to get this out into the world for y'all. As you all know, we prefer to get things out as soon as they are ready, and this is almost ready. So so with that, I will go ahead and pause my share here, or just pause my rambling, and pop on over to the Q&A and answer some questions. Okay, so someone asked for us to send the recording. Don't worry about that. We always record all of these webinars. They are posted both to our help center, live on our YouTube channel, and we'll also email it out in the Keeper update next week. In case you can't wait for the Keeper update, it's in your catch up with Keeper webinars. So it's right here in our help center. You can see every update and all of the things that we talked about on those updates as well. An anonymous attendee asked, what will happen if a document's emailed to Keeper from an email address that isn't in Keeper as a client yet? So like they send it from their personal email, or their assistant sends the receipt. So there's a couple of things we're going to do here. Basically, there are like, we built in this concept of essentially staging areas where you can see files where there's ambiguity on which receipt which client they should go to. And then we're also working on some functionality so that we can email them back and say like, hey, this email wasn't recognized, for example. Okay. Anonymous attendee asked, will receipt capture also break out sales taxes in the US if you like, specifically for nonprofits? That's not functionality we built, but it's great feedback. And that's one of the great things about it being an alpha, it being in a beta. We're absolutely planning to rapidly improve Keeper's receipt management functionality week over week. So definitely something we could support. Sue asked, are you working on having vendors email invoices to be synced with QuickBooks? I'm not sure I quite understand this. But if you do have a vendor email you a receipt or an invoice, you can post it as a bill instead of just as an expense, which will make it something that you need to pay. Okay, Janelle asked, if a client has 7 different companies and 1 email, how will the receipts be forwarded to the right spot? This is a great question, and is one of the things that we really wrestled with. So today, like if you use something like Keeper, if you use something like QuickBooks' receipt functionality or one of the other paid receipt solutions, you have like company A, company B, et cetera, for 7 different companies. And then you're sort of putting it on your user. It's this terrible you're putting it on your client. It's this terrible user experience because no client wants to remember like, okay, let me send it to this one or that one or the other. So what we do instead is, again, they just need to use the same email address, and then we'll automatically flag any emailed in documents from potentially ambiguous contacts. So here, for example, we can see this was sent from Ben. Ben has access to Jensen. Florida Test Facilities, Democo, and 1801 brands. So basically, you're able to preview these receipts here first, and then choose which file it goes to next. Of course, you can also ask your clients questions if it's unclear. Sue asked, will we be adding class in Keeper so we can tag a receipt with either a class or a customer job? Yes, class, location, customer should all be here. I think you can see this file has class on. So class already supported today. But yeah, class, location, customer, and even marking transactions as billable should all be a part of this. Samantha asked, does Keeper recognize QuickBooks rules? Unfortunately, not at the moment. We can recognize if a rule was used, but we can't see what rule that was. So for example, that does power our transactions auto added by bank rule report, but unfortunately we can't sort of sync with the rules because that API is not public yet. Janine asked a not receipt related question, so I'm going to take a step back. She asked about the debit card transaction. So if a vendor was paid by a mix of checks and debits, would the 1099 be only the amount paid by check? The answer is yes. Yeah. So basically, if you pay someone partially by some non-reportable types and partially by some reportable types, you only report the reportable types. So in this case, checks, yes, debits excluded. I should also mention you don't need to use exclusion by check, by check number, the functionality we just rolled out today. The prior version that we also had available is you can come here and exclude an individual transaction. So if you're like, this is debit card spend, I know that, you can exclude that here by clicking the exclude button. Okay. Cindy asked, we're going to go until 10:30 and then we will switch over. Looks like we've got a few questions here. Okay, Cindy asked, where can you see your phone number? So that's in your client portal. You go to practice settings, client portal, branding, and then practice phone number. An anonymous attendee asked, does the receipt get attached to the transaction in QuickBooks? The answer is yes, definitely. That is almost, one might say that is the entire point of the feature. So yes. Nicole asked, how does Keeper route receipts from text and email to the appropriate client? It's based on your client's contacts. So again, this is leveraging all the functionality that we already have in place, all the work that you've already done to set up this client. So your clients have email addresses, your clients have phone numbers, and we'll use that to route the inbound documents appropriately. Bonnie asked, will there be a mobile app? The answer is yes. It probably will not be live in the beta or even in the early parts of the launch, but definitely working on a mobile app. Lonnie asked, what does it look like for the client if they want to go back and look at a receipt in the portal? There are a few different ways where that can look. This is still in the sort of earlier parts of development, so I don't have something I can show today, but definitely we're thinking a lot about how do we make these documents available to the clients as well. Anna asked about our timeline. How long are we thinking about rolling out? How soon are we thinking about rolling out receipt capture? I wouldn't show you if it wasn't soon. The beta should go live probably in the early parts of December, and we're hoping for a general release by the beginning of by the end of the month. Okay, Melissa asked, should we expect a price increase once receipt management launches? So receipt management will be a paid upgrade. There will also be parts of receipt management that are free so that you can still take advantage of all of the new functionality that doesn't really tie to some of the more advanced features that we actually have to pay a lot for the OCR tooling that we use. So that's why we have to charge. But it is not going to affect anything that's in core within Keeper today. So when we launch receipts, you'll get more for free. There will be also more that you can pay for. And just like everything in Keeper, you can choose for it on a client-by-client basis. Tiffany said she wasn't seeing the link to the chat. I think link to the beta sign up. I think Shayna has now posted that. Someone asked about files. So we previewed the files 2.0 beta. So someone asked about that. That should go live either next week or the following week. So we've been working dedicated with around 200 or so beta accounts to make sure that all of that functionality goes live, just so that people can see what we're talking about here. So basically, Files 2.0 will allow for full custom files management. So you can create folders, manage them here. You'd be able to bulk move files around, download files, and so on. Okay, some duplicate questions here. Okay, I think I've answered a lot of these. Okay. Tiffany asked, we'll be able to print a document that contains all of the images if the client closes their company. The answer is yes. That actually is coming with Files 2.0, not with receipts, which again speaks to how a lot of these features build on one another. But yes, we are working on bulk exporting of files. Okay. So there's a few more questions here, but I want to make sure I give Melissa some time here. So I am going to go ahead and pause now. We'll open back up to the Q&A after Melissa finishes up, if there's more time. Otherwise, we will get back to your questions later. All right. So Melissa, I am going to go ahead and invite you up as a analyst. All right.
There we go.
Melissa, welcome.
I have face now.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is great. I'm excited. You made my day. I'm gonna have receipt management and keeper.
I'm glad. I think you're going to make a whole lot more people's days as well. So
That.
I think probably like if you can even right size your pricing with one client, the leverage you have is so huge it like pays for your entire keeper subscription for the year.
You can't, yes, and that's very true. And I even have some numbers to kind of back that up because I'm actually in the middle. I started early this year, so that way I could implement some of the changes that I'm making to my own mini course. And so I'm in the middle of like all of the price increase and analysis and sending out my letters and the updates and all of that. And I'm really excited to say it's I'm getting really great responses from clients already, which I think the big thing is just you need to do it, but I think we're doing it really well. So that's always a better way to do it, right?
Awesome. Well, before I let you take things away, let me introduce you to the room here. So for those of you who have not met Melissa, seen Melissa speak at BKX, or just otherwise heard her general reputation, Melissa runs bookkeeping for painters. It is an amazing bookkeeping practice that I think really embodies a lot of what I think the future of bookkeeping looks like. So you've got value-based pricing, you've got niched accounting, and you've got advisory style services, so moving beyond just sort of pure core bookkeeping. So I really think like the bookkeeping for painters of the world are really the future. And in order, one of the great things about niching is it lets you charge more because you actually know more about your clients. You can deliver more about your clients. Melissa also recently launched a course, and she had publicized some materials, things like a price increase letter. So I'm gonna let Melissa take it away and talk a little bit more about how she thinks about pricing, how she thinks about price increases, and where you can go to learn more.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben, for giving me all the compliments. Get a little, red in the face with that. But yeah, for those of you that don't know me, I'll tell you a little bit about bookkeeping for painters. You can, look us up, bookkeepingforpainters.com. That way, if you want to, check to see that we're legit, we are. Ben can see that because we are Keeper users and we have been for quite some time. So right now, I want to say we have probably 150 clients or so, maybe a little bit more that are up, using Keeper. We do have some tax only clients. So we have been serving painting businesses since 2016. I have a team of approximately 20, combination between employees and then subcontractors. Um, our subcontractors are a mix of US-based subcontractors and outsourced subcontractors that we have hired directly on our, without using a firm. I'm saying all of this because you guys might have some questions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. But this kind of sets up for, the conversation that we have around pricing is how we're structured, right? We have quite a big team and quite a lot of clients. Since 2016, we've been serving painting businesses. We did kind of take a detour, I would say, in about 2019 and started serving some adjacent trades. And then we did, an about face like really quickly and decided that we were going to solely focus on painting businesses. If you ever meet me in person, you can go ahead and ask me if I'll ever work with landscapers again, and we'll have a really good conversation about that. The answer is no. When it comes to, how we organize our business, we actually have 4 divisions. So we have bookkeeping, which was the core where we started everything. Advisory. So we do provide advisory services to our clients. We have a tax department. We are not a CPA firm at this time, but that is coming soon. I always say that because you don't have to be a CPA to, have tax services. So we do have a team of enrolled agents, and then we do have an automation division. So we do provide back-end automation services to our clients to help them automate their sales process. So automating the sales process for painting businesses, as well as the onboarding of subcontractors. And so in the process of setting up a lot of the sales systems for painting businesses, it's something that I've always done the sales for our company, and I have been in sales for over 15 years. I really got inspired while helping set that up to start doing the same thing for bookkeepers as well. So it kind of all comes full circle, right? So we have approximately a $2 million bookkeeping business with the advisory, the automation, and the tax services, serving approximately 165 clients. And one of the things that we put in our contract, which is the first thing that I include in my mini course, is a clause about price increases, because I found since 2016, since implementing different departments as we go, finding out that maybe I underpriced to begin with, maybe the scope changed, inflation, we went through the period of COVID, right? Lots of things have changed that we needed to prepare our clients ahead of time for price increases that will come in the future. And one of the biggest mistakes I made through this process was not preparing people ahead of time. And so I got a lot of the backlash when I first started to implement price increases because they came out of left field, right? Nobody knew that they were coming. I didn't have a good process. I didn't have a good system. There was lots of changes and a lot of really rapid growth, right? So as these changes are happening, and so that was a big reason that I decided to put this together for other bookkeepers, because I know I struggled through it. If I could help you guys do the same thing without that struggle, that would really help. And the first step of that is setting the expectations and preparing for price increases from the get-go. Don't wait until you're at $2 million in annual revenue to start thinking about how you're going to increase your prices. Set it up from the beginning, so that way, as you guys grow, things are going to be easier for you. I guess I can keep going, but I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I don't know if
Yeah, no, I'm curious. When you get to the point where you have to like have the awkward conversation about increasing someone's prices the first time. So I think like second
Mhm.
time they're used to it, whatever, back to life. Um, and I like the value they get from your services so exceed the whatever percent increase. That it almost always makes sense. But like the first time, can you tell us a story about like how that goes, what objections you had to handle, like when do you know if you're going to be able to make this work or if you and the client need to part ways, um, to sort of reset those expectations in the first place?
That's a great question. So I can think of like several years ago, but then I can also tell you recently that I messed up. So I always like to tell people how I mess up so that you know that I don't fully have my shit together enough. That I'm not in the trenches with you guys. Trust me, I still I'm still learning every day. And so I'll use this example is that I recently implemented a price increase and I did not follow my own process. I just stop right there and be like, Melissa, what are you doing? So I am probably the biggest problem in my own business, which a lot of you might relate to that as well, where I have much smarter people that remind me to do the things that I teach other people to do because I will just, be doing my thing. Yeah, Samantha, same, right? We're, do as I say, not as I do, right? No, so I did not follow this process. And the reason being is that diving into my price increase season, I pull, we have production hours for all of our clients, right? So we're tracking using Keyword time tracking. Um, and so tracking, how many hours are spent on bookkeeping, how many hours are spent at advisory, how many hours are spent on quality control. Very, very detailed because we have different people doing those things. So in our system, most of our clients are bookkeeping and advisory clients. They're going to have a bookkeeping specialist that's doing the bookkeeping work, a quality control bookkeeper that's going to QC that bookkeeper, and then an advisor or an account manager that does the client facing work. So there's three people involved in a client. I need to know all their hours. I need to, be able to have an idea of what their estimated production rate is, so that way I can get a gross profit by client. So I do job profitability reporting on every single client with those hours, with our software costs to get an idea of what the gross profit is. And so as I had pulled all of these numbers back in July. I started mid-year because I do a mid-year price increase, and an annual price increase as part of my process. So I'm following the process, right? So I pull the numbers in July and I have my biggest client and they're pretty low. I've got like a 15% gross profit. I pull it up and they went from like 8 or 9 million to 13.9 million out of nowhere. It just hits you, right? Like that happens if you're not doing the bookkeeping on the account, right? And somebody doesn't say, hey, just want to let you know that they did an extra $5 million this quarter. That conversation didn't happen. So I panic. I'm like, okay. Um, but as life happens, I'm like, okay, they're going to need a price increase, put them at the top of my list. I got to talk to their advisor and see like what's going on. Is this, what do we expect in the future? Is this going to keep happening? Get around to it. Well, a month goes around and I haven't done that yet. It falls to the bottom of my pile. So it's August and I'm like, okay, let me rerun these numbers, just make sure my numbers are still right before I reach out to the client. Pull the numbers, and this client is at $20 million. Okay, so it's been like 5 minutes. Like, how did you go from 13 million to $20 million? Like, that's legitimately insane for like any business, right? Like, that's not just me. Uh, that's
Maybe
that's that's
maybe
crazy.
maybe we should be having this client on for our next catch up with Keeper 11.
I'm like, okay, so this client's like legit, right? Is something wrong? So now I'm pulling in. I'm like, is this right? Like, yeah, it's right. And so we're at the end of August, beginning of September, and I'm like, I can't wait to implement a price increase on this client because he just went from we priced this client at when they were doing 9-10 million, they are now at 20 million. And so I'm like, we've got to change this now. So I get everything together. And then I kind of follow the rest of my process in a sense where I get the letter together and I get the pricing and I do this and I send it and I let them know we're going to have to do a price increase within the next 2 weeks. because of XYZ. This happened, blah, blah, blah. Needless to say, they're not thrilled about it because they didn't get any notice. And it didn't matter that I was panicked because I messed up. I didn't do the right thing and give them notice. And I realized that. Almost immediately. And so I got into a meeting with them, which is probably what I should have done anyway, because this is a huge client. And I had to kind of talk them down and be like, I do care about you, but to be honest, and this is the best thing, right? Honesty is the best policy. I freaked out. How the hell did you guys go from 9 million to $20 million? And then we started having another conversation, and they were like, oh, okay. And like, they understood. They're like, yeah, if that happened to us, we probably would panic too. And then I was just real with them. I was like, look, like, I have a negative gross profit on your account within the last month. Like, this happened out of nowhere. What are your plans? We started talking. Anyway, so I increased that client. They were paying us about $89.95. They're paying us about $15,000 a month now. We actually, this is the first time I've ever done this. I have implemented a monthly price increase plan with this client, where I personally, as the CEO of the company, will run their reports every single month and find out what their reporting is, what their production rate is, and implement a new price every month, depending on where they are in their growth. Because I've never had a company that had plans to get to $100 million within a calendar year, but they do. So this is, speaking of a whale, this will make you rethink some of your processes. But follow your processes, and then you don't have to run into these problems. It does have a good end of the story, but it could have gone really wrong. I could have, and potentially was for a little while, going to lose one of my biggest clients because I did not follow my own process. So long story.
Wow. That's
I'm a
amazing.
rambler.
So you mentioned, so now you've got this client on a monthly increase. You mentioned you
Yeah.
do mid-year and annual price increases. So for a typical client, do you do annual price increases, like twice a year price increases? Is
Great
that,
question.
yeah, yes. Tell me more about how you think about the timing of things.
Yeah, so I break out price increases by your typical scope of work. Your client wants more, right? And then your general price increases. And so your scope of work, it needs to be done as it happens, right? I want job costing, pay me more money. I just added 4 different bank. I'm going to do profit first now, and I have 15 accounts, none of which you can set up an automated transfer. Like, I'm going to charge you more money now. So that's as it comes up. What you want to do is, for that, just ensure that you're having those conversations every time. Because if you let it slide, you let it slide, you let it slide, that's when you get to the end of the year and you realize, oh my God, I spend 200% more time than I budgeted for this client, because all those little things added up. So the first thing is just accepting that when scope comes your way, that you do need to hand back a price increase with that. And that's the biggest thing, because I see, so the scope creep for a reason is that they keep adding those little things. Those little things need to equate to more money as they're happening. Now, if that doesn't happen, I understand it doesn't, you want to check twice a year. So I price based on annual revenue, but also paired with gross profit by client. I've got a really good system where revenue does work for us 98% of the time. But I do also run gross profit by client, because you have those people that want additional, but you also have the easy clients, right? And I don't want to penalize my easy clients with pricing that might be crazy for them. Like, as an example, I have a client that does $1.8 million in annual revenue, and he is priced at a $500,000 a month client. And we still make so much money on this man because he's just such a great, easy client. And so I'm not going to charge him. I could, but I'm, that somewhat, ethical when it comes to pricing, despite the fact that I sell on how to increase prices. The reason I do this is so that it's fair for the client and it's fair for us. So I don't want you to think this price increase or anything else I do sales related is like, we're going to get one over on the client and we're just going to make a bunch of money. It's like, no, like, I understand that the hesitation to increase your price because you feel like you're going to lose your client. You don't know if it's fair to them. You don't know if it's fair to you. And I try to make that as transparent as possible. So when it comes to, I lost my train of thought. I got to circle back.
We're talking about
Where were we?
price increase scheduling.
Price increase scheduling. So yeah, so the reason why I do it twice a year, I do it based on the annual revenue paired with gross profit. You could still do this if you price differently, because what it's going to do is just get you on the habit to check in with your pricing twice a year. So I run my numbers from January to June. So each July, I'm looking at what their revenue is, and I'm looking at their rolling 12 revenue to get a projected estimate of where they're going to be. I don't price based on projections, but it gives me an idea of, do I need to check back in on this person at the end of the year? So that's one thing. Again, I could price based on projections. I don't think it's fair, because I think we all know you could have a really great first quarter, really great second quarter, third quarter drops off the rocks. I'm not going to price based off projections. And then I run the second July through December, and then do annual price increases usually in January. Now, what I'm changing this year is that I've been running reports as early, I was doing my mid-year, but as early as October. And I'm doing a phased price increase this year, where I do have a few people where they're going to, we're basically, we know that they've already exceeded their annual revenue by October. Like they've already jumped up a tier. They already need a price increase. And so we know that unless they're like my other client, they're not going to do $1 million in the next, 30 days, just based off their historical data, that they're going to need this price increase. We know that they're going to need that price increase because they've already reached that dollar amount. And so what we're doing is, I actually already sent them out November 1st, that they are getting a price increase as of January 1st this year. Now, anybody that has taken my course, you'll know that it is a little different from what I teach in the course. That's where I will be implementing some updates this year to the course. So you guys have some, different options depending on what works for you. But the core is the same. Twice a year, you need to be checking in on your prices and making sure that everything is fair for you, in line, and also, for your clients as well. I will just kind of back up a little bit. I do not teach you how to price. That's the one thing. I will teach you how to set yourself up for success, manage expectations with your client, how to notify clients that you're going to increase your prices, and respond to maybe any potential objections that they have. But I will not actually set the price for you. I cannot claim to be an expert in that. If you saw my spreadsheets, you would agree.
Awesome. So the semi-annual check-in, do you treat new clients the same as existing clients, or do you handle those in a different way?
Now, I do include them in my check-in, because I think we've all brought on a client where we thought the scope was going to be one thing and then it was another. But a lot of times we're still perfectly in line with them at that point, and they don't need a price increase. I've very rarely had where we've had to change that up. Recently, I believe we had two, but they were startups. When they signed on, they hadn't even started their company yet. And so we make sure in our sales process, with the clause that we have, but also in the conversation that we have, you're a startup, this is your startup pricing. We're going to be checking in as we go, and there will be increases based on, what we have set up. So it's never a shock for them. And I think that's the big thing with the clause that I have for our engagement letter, but also the conversation that we even have in the beginning in the sales process, is that this is what you can expect in the future. And then it's not coming out of left field, and they don't feel like attacked, or they don't feel like we don't value their service. They know ahead of time, this is how we do things, just like I'm sure they have a process for that in their business as well.
And um, so you do more than just the bookkeeping. You do the bookkeeping, you do advisory, and then you do tax, and you do this automation, which are kind of different, like different beasts a little bit. Do
Yes.
those slot just as seamlessly into your price increase framework, or do you have to think about those differently?
Great question. So we personally do think about those separately. And so in my price increase letter, so the mini course, it comes with an engagement letter clause that you can input into your current engagement letter. It doesn't have a full engagement letter because nobody's lawyer would let them sell that. But it does have a clause that you can insert, and you can modify it as needed. It comes with notification email. So like two different email templates, depending on if it's scope of work increase or if it's a general increase, to let them know, hey, blah, 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 we're going to increase you, please see attached. And that attached is the price increase letter, the PDF. So the actual price increase letter for my company, I do actually have like a little kind of clause in there that says, your tax and your automation services are separate from the discussion that we're having about prices, because of the way that we price our tax and automation services. Those two departments are basically, I always joke that it's tax island. Tax island is operating over there in, tax world on their own. We do tax price increases, but it's a completely separate conversation. We don't include it in the annual price increases. Our annual price increases are based on the bookkeeping and the advisory that kind of come hand in hand. The tax work and the automation work are completely separate for us personally. And that's the beauty of this too, is that you can modify this. This is a great, you could take this and just use it, and just go with it. But you can also very easily modify it to what you do in your business. And I highly recommend that, because if you don't, if you don't have your business set up exactly the same as me, it might not make sense for you.
And you talked about with the largest client, I remember going back earlier in the conversation, you mentioned, so you talked a lot about the notices that you send here, and you also talked about you sent them a notice and then you hopped on a phone with them. Is there a threshold where you have these done over email versus call? Do you think about, like, especially if this is your first time, do you call everyone? How do you think about when someone should be, when a price increase should be a phone call versus an email, versus if it is a phone call, how much to put into the email versus saying, let's hop on the phone? So yeah, when do they get the more personal touch? When do they just get the email?
That's a great question. So the reason why, and I kind of cover this in the course, the reason why I have it set up this way, I have it where I send everybody an email, period. And then in the email template, it says, if you want to schedule a call with me, if you want to talk about this face to face, here's my scheduling link. Let's schedule and hop on a call. And the reason I do that is for a variety of reasons. I just feel like personally, I have very limited time, not just because of the business, but also I've got 3 kids. I've got a lot going on. And say, for instance, Keeper was going to implement a price increase, and you were
We're
like,
not,
Melissa,
by the
I
way.
need you to.
I need to call this out. We're
They're
not.
not.
That's
They're not. They're not.
not the purpose of this webinar.
That's not the purpose. But
But
say that
say we
you were,
were.
right? Because I
Continue the
work with you. You're a
hypothetical.
service that I provide. It's a hypothetical. And you were to schedule a meeting with me to just be like, Melissa, we're increasing Keeper for whatever reason. I'd be like, Ben, this could have been an email, dude. Like, I'm so busy, and so that's me personally. And so I feel like giving people the option. Now, I know that there are people that have more personal relationships when it comes to finance specifically, where a phone call or a Zoom meeting would be preferable. That's right. And I've had this asked by people that are in my course. They're like, I sent this to a client and they were offended. And that's where I recommend you know your clients better than anyone. So you're going to know if you have that one client that's actually, your aunt's best friend from elementary school that's going to be offended if you send an email and you don't make it a phone call. That's where you have to modify it to you. But where I give you that out is that every letter, it specifically states in that email, schedule a meeting with me and we'll talk about this. I also have a couple of other clauses in there that are basically say, like, if you disagree with this price, let's talk. Like, let's have that conversation. And I will say again, so last year I sent out 100 and I had 4 or 5 people schedule meetings with me. Now, if we take that again by my hourly rate, so which the audacity, I calculate my hourly rate at $500 an hour, by the way. So if we take that, if I were to just try to get all 100 of those people into, say, even just a 30-minute meeting, at how much is that? Let's do the math, right? So that's $25,000 of my time in meetings that most of those people probably didn't want, right? So you have to think about when to, especially as you scale, just like how the efficiency of it, right? That being said, if that 30 minutes is the difference between me losing that $14,000 a month client, that's where, again, you have to take into account the, just there's going to be some subjectivity to it.
And I think we have time. I have time for maybe one more question that I want to at least open it up to some of the questions that have been coming into the chat. So it sounds like you do the price increases. Is that always the plan? Do you think there's ever a time where it makes more sense for the engagement manager to do the price increases? Is there actually a reason why it might strategically not be a good idea to have the engagement manager be introduced to the pricing? How do you think about who does the price increase?
Great question. So So I've been in sales management for 15 years now. And in every sales role that I've ever been in, it has always been a great sales tactic and kind of like a weight off even just my shoulders when I wasn't in management and I was a salesperson, to have that other person that you can go to when you have like a price. So you want a discount. You have, oh, I have to ask my manager. Let me go ask my manager, right? Like, or somebody has a question about something. You have that second person that you can go to, right? And so it's very intentional that my account managers typically don't deal with pricing because I want them to be the good guy. And I believe it was Ben Day, if anybody knows him, that has always referred to me as the big bad billing Melissa, in the sense that that's how I operate in my company, which is that when it has to do with those tough conversations, I'm the one that's going to have the tough conversation. I'm the bad cop to the good cop in a sense, because I want my clients to have that trusting relationship with their advisor that doesn't get sullied by money. Money is an uncomfortable conversation. I teach people how to make it less uncomfortable, but it's still somewhat uncomfortable, especially generationally, depending on what generation you come from. There's certain conversations that are just really hard for people to have. And I don't want to put that on my team. Now, is this going to be me forever? No, I have grand, glorious goals of replacing me, but in my, mind, that will still be a finance person that is separate from the person that they're having that relationship with. So that way they can be, the bad cop to the good cop, right? So to give just a brief example, I know we don't have a lot of time, but if I've in the past I have actually discounted price increases because the advisor came back to me and said, "Hey, I know you ran the report, so maybe you didn't know XYZ about this other situation that I've been having with the client." So then I could go back and say, okay, actually go ahead and you let them know now that we're going to decrease it based on the fact that you went to work for them. Like you went and you kind of gave me a reason why we need to decrease this, blah, blah, blah. And then it kind of gives them, again, another win. Like they can advocate for their clients. So I could get into this, but I know we don't have a lot of time. Yeah, for me, I think it's really important that it stays separately. For a single company, obviously you can't do that. Although I have always joked in the past that you can actually have your own VA do it for you. And if you don't have a VA, you can just create another Gmail account and you can have a VA named Trevor, and Trevor can send that price increase information over and they don't have to know it's you ghosting us, Trevor.
I love it.
So
Yeah, that's definitely something. I don't think we ever did it. We thought about it a lot when we were like really, really tiny. We'd be like,
yeah.
we always said, let me talk to my X team, right? So it's like, let me talk to my
Yeah.
product team, and the product team was like me and Kenny, and I would turn to Kenny and I
Yeah,
would read
exactly.
the question. So you can always make yourself seem bigger by having teams, even if the team is just you.
100%.
Okay, so we
100%.
have a couple of questions here about your course. Seems like a lot of people are excited. If people want to take your course, if they want to get your engagement letter, they want to read more about all the amazing things you have to say about price increases, where can they do that?
Great question. So the easiest place would be to go to increase.melissahonan.com. You could also just go to melissahonan.com and it's going to be in the solutions tab. So you just have to remember my name. And again, the audacity that I have a website that is my own name, but yes, increase.melissahonan.com. You'll see a lot of reviews from other people that have taken it. If this is something you're trying to implement right now, because it's price increase season, right? It's the end of the year. It's the time to do it. It is a mini course for a reason. I ramble a lot. And so I was very intentional to not ramble when I created this course and to just give you the good stuff so that you could take it and you can implement it immediately. So don't be afraid that like, I don't have a bunch of time to listen to her. You don't have to listen to me do anything. It's very quick. It's very easy to implement it. And you do also have a direct line to email me if you have any questions about it. Same, Kate, rambling is my downfall. So you also have a direct way to contact me once you do sign up for the course too. So if you have any of these things where you're like, that doesn't quite work and I'm not sure how to do this, I have people email me all the time, give me their specific scenario, and I'd be happy to help you craft it and give you some ideas on how to make it work for you.
Awesome. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today. And then also to the rest of the webinar here, thank you all so much for taking the time. I really, really appreciate it. Melissa, I think this was a masterclass, but it was only a mini masterclass. There's a
It's
masterclass
just a
behind the
mini one.
masterclass. So If you are dreading price increase season, or if you think you just want, like, this is not an expensive course here, folks. It's a very reasonable course, and if it helps you send one more price increase, increase your client's rate by like 10%, you're gonna get way more out of it than what you paid. So
Now, do you mind if I just plug one
please,
more,
yeah,
more
yeah,
thing?
correct me.
So say for instance, if you don't have any clients, so you don't have any clients to price increase, although you probably wouldn't be on the keeper webinar. But even if you do, like you have a couple of them, they're new clients and you don't have to price increase them. I do have a Facebook group. It's called Sales Tips for Bookkeepers, sales and marketing tips for bookkeepers. You can do it's like at Tips for Bookkeepers on Facebook. It is a public free group about all things sales, marketing, automation. You're welcome to go there and get lots of free advice and lots of things on there that you could, don't have to buy a course to do.
Awesome. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone else, thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your November. Good luck with the November closes coming up next week. And we will see you all here in a month.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate you.
Bye, everyone.